Now, that leads us to the question of how much income would you need to buy the most expensive house in Canada? Have you ever wondered how much of a mortgage you can afford based on your income? Or how much income it takes to get one of those $500,000 mortgages, or one of those $1 million mortgages, or a $2 million mortgage, or how much income it takes to buy the most expensive property for sale in Canada, which I'm going to show you at the very end. And I think it's going to blow your mind how much income you need to buy it. And not only am I going to show you how much income it takes to get those mortgages, but I'm going to show you exactly how to determine how much mortgage you qualify for. So by the end of this video, you won't need this video because you'll have the tools you need in order to run the numbers for yourself, using a little app that I'll link in the description below. But before I get into it, my name is Nolan Matthias, and if you want to thrive financially, this is the place for you. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. And if you're in the process of looking for a mortgage or getting a mortgage, make sure you go to mortgagesecrets.ca to get my new book, Mortgage Secrets, absolutely for free. All you have to do is pay the shipping and handling. Okay, so let's discuss mortgages, incomes, and how much income you need to get various sizes of mortgages. And I'm going to preface this with everything I'm about to show you is an example, and it's based on rates today. And as you know, if you've been watching my videos, rates have been changing pretty frequently. So these rates that we're using today can change pretty much overnight, as too can mortgage rules. So if you're watching this 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road, the information in this video may not be exactly correct. But if you go to the app that I'm going to link to in the description below, all the information will be updated as it happens. So you will always have the current up-to-date information on how to qualify, and I'm going to show you exactly how to use the app in order to determine the numbers for yourself. So regardless if the rates have changed or the rules have changed, you're going to be good to go by the end of this video. So I'm going to start by jumping you into the My Mortgage Toolbox app. And as you can see, there's all sorts of various tools here, including a purchase calculator, a stress test calculator, and the one we're going to use for this video, which is the required income calculator. Now, I'm going to start by showing you the assumptions that we're making in this example scenario. So the first thing to note is I've stripped out taxes, heating costs, and condo fees. But I'm also using more conservative debt servicing ratios, that's the percentage of your income that's allowed to go to your debts, in order to compensate for that. So the numbers in this example should be fairly accurate, but it's important to note that anytime you're running these types of numbers, it's important to get them run by a professional, not just on an app like what we're using today, because the actual amount that you will qualify for is based on more than just these hypothetical numbers. It's based on your credit, it's based on your other liabilities, and it's based on your income. And by the way, your total income may not be the income that lenders use to qualify you. In some cases, they may use more income, and in some cases, they may use less. So it's important to get your pre-qualifications and your numbers run by a professional so that you can determine the exact amount that you qualify for. But again, this is an example, and it's going to show you how to get pretty close. I've also assumed for these examples that we're going to use a 25-year amortization and not a 30-year amortization. If you're putting more than 20% down, a 30-year amortization may be available to you, which may reduce the amount of income required in order to purchase a home. And the way I've set this up as well, for the most part, if you take your maximum mortgage amount and add your down payment to it, that is going to give you about the maximum purchase price that you qualify for. Now, if you're only putting 5% down, your maximum purchase price is probably going to be about your maximum mortgage amount after you factor in the insurance premiums. Now, I want to start by showing you a really simple number. It is how much income would be required to have a mortgage amount of $100,000. The reason why I'm showing you this number is because it's really convenient to use to create a quick estimate of how much mortgage somebody qualifies for. Yes, realtors, I'm looking at you. So to qualify for $100,000 in mortgage, somebody would typically need about $25,000 in income. And if you want to extrapolate this out, in order to qualify for $200,000 in mortgage, they need about $50,000 in income. For $300,000, they need $75,000 in income, and so on and so on. Now, in 2020, 2021, with interest rates being lower, this number was closer to $20,000. And as interest rates increase and fluctuate, this number will always change. But if you work in the industry and you want to quickly be able to guesstimate a number, well, knowing what this number is at any given time is incredibly useful. You can also use what's called factor 4, where you take somebody's income, multiply it by 4, and that gives you approximately what they would qualify for in mortgage. And since there's some guys out there on YouTube who like to make videos about me and tear apart things like the 1%, 10% rule, saying it's the stupidest rule they've ever heard of, even though it's been around for like 30 to 40 years, well, factor 4 was taught to me 20 years ago by one of the top realtors in Calgary named Ron Stanners. He owned one of the largest independent real estate companies in Canada, and yes, he'd been using that rule since about the 80s. So no, not making this up on the fly. This is a real tool that realtors and people in the mortgage industry have used for a very, very long time. Now, I guess I just gave most of it away because now you can quickly do the math in your head. But let's go ahead and run the numbers anyways for various mortgage amounts. So let's say we want to jump up to $250,000. Well, you'd need about $62,000 in income. And if you want to jump up to around $500,000 in mortgage, then you start to need about $125,000 in income. Now, this doesn't need to be your personal income. It can be your income and a spouse's income. Or if you're just trying to get into the real estate market and you want to buy with a friend, you can do that too and combine your incomes in order to get into the market. Now, moving up into that $750,000 range, you need about $186,000 in household income. And then moving to that $1 million mortgage amount, you need about $250,000. See how knowing how much income you would need to qualify for $100,000 makes doing the calculations real easy out to $1 million. It's just 10 times. Now, obviously, as we're getting out to $1.5 million, this would be your Ontario and BC properties. Obviously, in most cases, you need about $372,000. When we get into the $2 million range, you're now looking at needing around $496,000 in income to qualify. Now, that leads us to the question of how much income would you need to buy the most expensive house in Canada? Well, I'll tell you exactly how much in a second. But first, what I want to show you is a little trick I would use in order to give yourself a whole bunch of leeway when it comes to affording a home. So in other words, not buying up to your maximum purchase price, but making sure that you have enough money left over at the end of the month in order to do things like save. And what I would do is I would go into here and I would edit the settings. And I would go to this max GDS TDS section. And what I would do is I would click on that little 35 up there. And if you really want to give yourself a ton of room in order to make sure that you can afford the house that you're buying, I'd switch that number to 25%. So in other words, 25% of your income goes towards your housing costs or your mortgage costs. And going back to our $100,000 mortgage amount, what it shows is if you're buying conservatively, and I mean really conservatively, a property that you can absolutely afford and will be able to afford for the long term, then you only want to be getting a mortgage that is the equivalent of about $100,000 for every $35,000 in income that you make. Now, I know that may not seem like a lot, but believe me, when you get into that first home and you find out all the other expenses that come along with it, this is probably going to be one of the most prudent decisions you ever make in your life. And keep in mind, your first home doesn't have to be your forever home, but when you're buying a first home, buying conservatively will allow you to get used to the expenses that come along with home ownership, and you can always move up to a bigger home once you feel more comfortable, or once your income has gone up significantly. Now, back to buying the most expensive home in Canada, which is a property in Whistler that is listed for $40 million. Now, in this case, we're going to assume that that $40 million buyer is putting 20% down and that they absolutely qualify to buy the home. By the way, a lot of times when you see people buy extremely expensive properties, they are buying them with a mortgage because they are looking at them as an investment, and they'd rather get a mortgage and leave their money in investments and businesses working for them than put all the money into a property. So with 20% down, that would mean that the most expensive home in Canada would have a $32 million mortgage on it. This also assumes that the person has a really good relationship with their bank and they're getting a $32 million mortgage. So of course they have a really good relationship with their bank. And we're going to assume that the bank is going to waive any sort of sliding scales and allow them to buy with 20% down. So that would leave them with a $32 million mortgage. Now pause the video and tell me in the comments section, how much income do you think they're going to need to be able to qualify for that $32 million mortgage? I'll wait. Okay, so drumroll please, the amount of income required to buy the most expensive house for sale in Canada with a $40 million purchase price and a $32 million mortgage is $7.95 million per year in annual income. So in other words, a celebrity, a CEO, someone who owns a massive business, or some other form of billionaire. Now, like I said, if you want to know what the numbers that you qualify for are, go to the link in the description below. You can get this app, play around with the numbers, but before you go house shopping, make sure you talk to a professional first and get the real number that you qualify for. Oh, and if you want to see more great information on mortgages and Canadian real estate, make sure you check out one of these videos here.